Is that do you feel like some of our future topics for advocacy are easy ones, or are we starting to get into things that are a little bit on the harder side?
Yeah, I don't know where the next easy issue is. We're starting to deal with some very contentious stuff, right? So, like last year's data privacy legislation passed. We had a couple years dealing with working on that kind of legislation for a while. From an industry perspective, to try to make it as least onerous as possible, right? A lot of this is around compliance costs. A lot of it is around how much it takes for a company to have to deal with it.
They're always going to say that, though. Every single data privacy conversation from a company perspective is like, well, it's going to cost me, so the prices are going to go up, so it's going to cost the customer.
For sure. But at the same time, a lot of those costs are legitimate. But not only that, you have one of the arguments that I spoke about that ended up being kind of the champion for the little guy when we talked about it was, think of during COVID how your habits changed, not just online and all the rest of the changes, but like
you're about to trigger me.
Think of that you take advantage of today now that we're out of COVID, all the delivery services, right? Think of the mom and pop restaurants, the tiny pizza shop you were able to order from during COVID because of those new technologies, right?
Yeah.
Think of all the data that pizza shop now has to deal with just because they now use an online ordering system where they didn't ever do that before. People phoned in, they took an order, the pizza showed up, like the person showed up to get the pizza and then left.
Yeah.
They have, if they're successful, hundreds of thousands of people's information now that they didn't have before, they didn't have to deal with before. And they're used to focusing on their dough and their ingredients and getting the pizzas delivered. They're not an IT shop.
They're not focused on PII.
They're not focused on PII.
Yep.
Did the people that provided them the service set them up right? Did they have a third-party service? Are they using something of Squarespace or something they built themselves? I don't know. But like, there's a lot of people out there that will be caught unawares of laws like that.
Yeah.
And that's a giant barrier to doing business in a state. And for an organization that I have to put the hat on now of a chamber-like organization, that again, for all the same reasons we want to pass computer science, because we want to make this area a greater place, we also want to make a place where people can build their own business. And there's not giant barriers to entry for that.
Yeah.
And do we have to be one of the first states that adopts that policy when we've already got such a badge of honor of doing business very openly and freely in this state? So those are things that have to be considered, and that's the kind of legislation that we have to be more and more worried about, because these issues are attractive to policymakers, because I think they're interested in them for various different reasons, but they don't necessarily understand the impact of passing legislation like that on big business. They're super savvy. They're doing business in multiple states, let alone international.
Yeah.
They know how to deal with this stuff. They've already built their systems in ways that they don't have to worry about complying with local laws. Local business or mid-sized business doesn't necessarily think about those things. I'm not saying that they shouldn't. I'm not saying that they shouldn't figure out how to protect consumers' rights. At all times, they need to be doing that, and they are. But when they have new things foisted upon them, when they're not thinking along those lines, having laws that have teeth to them, like penalties and dollar penalties and criminal penalties and things like that, that really has to have a lot more education to it before you pass that.
I don't disagree with that.
And so that's the kind of stuff that we're going to see more and more of when we talk about AI. Shortly after, when we were in DC, when we were in Las Vegas for CES, new legislation was introduced by press release talking about how to protect
music.
We're in Nashville. We want to be super protective of music rights and people's artists' rights. And the governor worked to sponsor legislation around helping to protect artists' voices, especially with respect to generative AI.
Yep. And
so, like, what are the ramifications of that? Like, are we talking about creating a new kind of right in local law that deals with that. How does that even work?
I do feel like as far as legal stuff goes, like that's where government should focus right now is on intellectual property and copyright infringement and stuff like that. Because ethically, there is a line with AI that we have to figure out.
Well, and those laws probably already exist in a lot of cases, and now you just have a new technology that's part of it. And I think what you're hinting at is a lot of your success has been in making sure they don't pass something that could hurt a lot of companies, a lot of individuals. And I know there have been many bills in the data policy world too, like 4 years ago or whatever, where it was up and you're like, if that passes, that's going to hurt a lot of people. And they would get killed at the last minute, or they turn into a study or something else. I know that those successes are out there. And so you almost become a watchdog to make sure things don't get passed then.
Yeah. I've worked in an industry that's like not the most wealthy industry, but we did have to deal with GDPR when it was enacted. And I can say from our perspective, like it's not that big of a burden on tech companies, at least. But I do think that something has to happen, because the opposite is like you've got a company that does business across North America and they've got 50 different data privacy policies that they've got to adhere to. So like should the focus be on some federal rules and then the states don't have to worry as much?
Yeah, we've had those conversations in DC, and
so
I can
say
they're frustrating. So yes,
that frustrating from. Well, we don't have to get into it from
no, I think you should.
So frustrating from what perspective?
I don't know if you want to say, or
I
think just say at the same time. 1, 2, 3, go.
No, I mean I think the issue ends up being for some of those types of visits is that, right now the current temperature in Congress is very gridlocked. Right, you can't get people to agree
on the data privacy stuff.
On things like data privacy,
you
may actually be able to get them to agree, but it ends up being politics about why they can't pass or why they can't move forward. And so that's the difficult stuff that when we go to DC, we say, okay, we don't want a state by state patchwork of laws. We don't want 20 different, 50 different.
So you're already saying that
laws.
type of stuff.
We do. Then when we say that needs to be done at the federal level, they say, yeah, but we can get no one to agree on that. Or like people are moving stuff, but it doesn't go anywhere because of politics or what have you. And so that makes it really difficult. That makes it open season for legislators at the local level to just start running with it, because there's no one at the federal level that's actually going to solve the problem.
I was actually surprised. Like Tennessee's not normally a get ahead of the federal government on policy state, but with the data privacy they did. I was surprised when they did something. I'll say that.
Because at that time we were one of the first in the top. Not if it wasn't the top 10, it was pretty close to that.
There's still only seven states that have something passed.
Enacted, maybe.
Enacted,
passed
that's what I mean.
We're
passed
up to like 13 or so.
You're right. Enacted is what I mean.
Yeah. So that will kick in July of 2025. So we've got a little time to help educate people and help them understand.
I don't from the state, like I read through it and it just didn't. It doesn't have teeth. Like everybody's exempt from doing anything, and the AG has to decide whether they're going to take something to court anyways. Like I can't sue a company here. And that's a big miss on my part, because like what's the point in having data privacy if the consumer am not protected?
Yeah.
What I would say is that it gives you a lot more breathing room to figure out your policies to do it yourself.
That's fair. That is fair.
And it gives Congress a lot more time to take national action.
And we've got something on the books.
And there's something on the books that's not bad.
That's a good perspective.
Right? And so to the extent, again, going back to do no harm.
Mm-hmm.
That was a lot of what the conversation was about, was to try to, and ours looks a little different than some of the other states, because we tried to say, okay, what are some of the barriers we can put into the law that make it easier for more companies to still exist without having to worry about implementing this until they get their act figured out.
Yeah.
Until they get figured out, I was like, okay, this might be something, like if the legislature comes back next year and changes a digit, well, that's going to screw them, right? They could, or if they come back in 26 after a year of impact, they're able to say, okay, we know fewer businesses are worried about this because they took the time to implement it.
Yeah.
And so that's better for most people. But at the same time, you still have a lot of companies that are big companies that are implementing the technologies and are focusing on that from the app level, from all the different service levels. And so they'll lead by example. And you might get companies that come in as service providers, say, look, we will solve, small company, we'll come and solve your problem by use this system, and we're all compliant, regardless of where you are in the world, this policy, right? And so that will help, should lower the cost for those small businesses to end up having to comply with those regs.
Yeah.
And the market worked, right?
Yeah.
I think that's an argument of like why we don't jump into drastic changes.
Yeah.
Because if you get the opportunity for people to come to the table and find ways to make things work, and then you end up having better policy written in it, and in the end, business can still do businessy things, and consumers end up getting protected. So I think that's the end goal. Whether we get there quicker is the harder thing.
Okay.
Right? Whether if you implemented a draconian thing really fast, do consumers benefit?
No. I mean, yeah, I'm with you. I understand what you're saying. What you're saying.
Yeah.
I like that's a new perspective for me though. The do no harm on the beginning or in the beginning part. I 100% agree with it because they definitely could be messing stuff up. Especially on the AI side. Like I worry that they'll make some sort of like this is banned or this is not applicable in these situations, or they'll remove it from some situation that maybe it doesn't need to be removed from.
Well, I will say, so the language of that voice legislation finally came out yesterday or the day before, doesn't even mention AI.
Huh.
The closest thing it talks about is algorithm, but it's mentioned once, and it really has less to do about people transforming people's voices to use in other contexts that like the generative AI does, and more about creating new rights in people's in photos, in videos, and voice and audio.
Wow. Okay. Yeah,
which has nothing to do with AI.
So then it doesn't matter what the tool is.
It doesn't matter what the tool is. It's more about
So are they
creating a new right.
So are they attacking NFTs?
Right. So a lot of this looks like name, image, likeness.
Yeah.
A lot of it looks like, not defamation law, but potentially like defamation law.
Wow.
Defamation law without the defamation, right?
Yeah.
It's all about like creating new rights in people's personas.
Yeah, it's misuse of like personal identity or like a sovereign identity, maybe a better way to say it.
When was the last time you posted to Instagram or Facebook
Me?
or any social media?
I mean, every day.
And when was the last time you posted a photo of someone that wasn't you?
Like, wasn't me or my immediate family?
Yeah.
I don't know.
It included someone.
It included, yeah, for sure. I do ones where I'm including them because I'm
you do
like even in the background.
Even in the
Oh, we'll just say all of them.
All of them,
like almost all
right?
of them. Yeah.
So every one of those people in Tennessee would have a right to their image.
I usually I like where you're going with that because I think that is a conversation that we need to have. But I personally like to ask for permission before I take pictures.
You're at Disney World and you're going to ask every person in the background for their permission.
Well, see, here's the thing. I've got this thing called technology, and I touch the person in the background, and they disappear.
Oh, yeah, but I mean, I know what you mean. It's like when I'm at a meetup and I'm taking a picture and everybody's even waving in the background.
Yeah.
It's almost like they are giving me permission,
right?
But I don't have a written permission for that.
I think that if you put an image up like that though, and then the person comes and says, "Please take that down," it's your responsibility to take it down.
I would too, yeah. But that right now is just personal courtesy. That's not law,
right? What if there's fines behind it and they don't have any process? There's no said process in
You're
the law.
not in their house.
Well, so just so everybody knows, we're talking like a GDPR type thing for personal use.
It's more like a state copyright in your persona.
Yeah.
Which
that sounds like we have to bring Alex back.
Yeah, like
AI, you're going to become like our referee commentator during football games. It's like, and let's go to Alex now for the new AI legislation, which